Have you ever wondered why two children sitting in the same classroom with the same teacher using the same textbook can end up with completely different futures? One child confidently explains ideas, writes powerful essays, solves problems with ease, and enjoys learning. The other struggles to understand questions, loses confidence, and slowly starts believing they just aren't good at school. Now here's the surprising part. It often isn't because one child is smarter. It's because one child developed a skill that affects every single subject in school. Not math, not science, not coding, reading. And today, I'll show you why reading, vocabulary, writing, and communication are some of the most valuable skills your child can build before middle school. But stay with me until the end, because I'll also share one daily habit that takes just 20 minutes and has helped millions of students become stronger learners. Before we talk about books, let me ask you something. Imagine giving two students the exact same math worksheet. One finishes quickly, the other keeps asking what the question even means. Is that really a math problem? Or is it actually a reading problem? We'll come back to that in a few minutes, because the answer surprises most parents. Why reading impacts every subject. Most parents naturally focus on math, and that's understandable. Math feels measurable. Correct answers, wrong answers, test scores. But here's something educational researchers have observed for years. Reading comprehension influences performance across nearly every subject. Think about science. Students aren't only memorizing facts, they're reading experiments, interpreting graphs, following instructions, explaining observations. History, they're reading long passages, comparing events, analyzing causes. Even math increasingly uses word problems that require students to understand the language before solving the equation. Here's a simple example. Imagine two grade 5 students. Both know how to divide fractions. Now they receive this question. A recipe uses 3/4 of a cup of flour. You want to make half the recipe. How much flour do you need? Student A immediately understands the problem. Student B gets confused before doing any math. Same math skill, different reading comprehension. The result? Different scores, different confidence, different attitude toward learning. Think about that for a second. Sometimes the challenge isn't the subject, it's understanding the question. And that's not even the biggest benefit of reading, because reading changes something far more important than grades. It changes how children think. Reading builds the brain. Let's imagine two children. Both are 10 years old. One spends 20 minutes every evening reading. The other spends 20 minutes endlessly scrolling short videos. Fast forward 5 years. Which child has seen thousands of new words? Which child has explored different cultures? Which child has practiced concentration almost every day? Reading is more than consuming information. It's active thinking. When children read, they imagine, predict, question, visualize, connect ideas. Every chapter becomes a small workout for the brain. Here's a real-life example many parents can relate to. A student begins grade 4 and struggles with reading aloud. Instead of forcing difficult books, the parents let the child choose topics they genuinely enjoy: space, animals, mysteries, graphic novels. Every night they read together for 20 minutes. No pressure, no punishment, just consistency. 6 months later, the child volunteers to read in class. A year later, teachers notice stronger vocabulary and better writing. What changed? Not intelligence, not expensive tutoring. A simple habit repeated consistently. That's the power of reading. But here's something most parents accidentally do. They ask, Did you finish your reading? Instead of asking, what was the most interesting thing you discovered today? One question checks a task. The other builds curiosity. And curiosity creates lifelong learners. Choosing the right books. One of the biggest mistakes parents make is choosing books that are either far too easy or far too difficult. Imagine asking someone who has just learned to swim to compete in the Olympics. That's how some children feel when they're handed books they aren't ready for. At the same time, if every book feels too easy, children stop growing. So how do you find the right balance? Here's a simple rule. A child should understand most of the words, but still discover a few new ones. The story should be challenging enough to keep them learning, but enjoyable enough that they want to turn the next page. For younger readers, picture books, beginning chapter books, graphic novels. For older elementary students, adventure stories, biographies, science books, historical fiction. And here's a tip many parents overlook. Let children choose some of their own books. A child who loves football may happily read a biography of their favorite athlete. A child fascinated by space may finish an entire astronomy book without being asked. The goal isn't just reading, it's helping children fall in love with learning. And in the next section, we're going to uncover a secret behind vocabulary growth that surprises almost every parent. Most people think vocabulary comes from memorizing long word lists. The truth is completely different. Most people think vocabulary means memorizing difficult words, but that's not how strong vocabulary is really built. Think about a child who sees the word enormous in a story. You could simply say, enormous means very big. Done. The child memorizes it and probably forgets it. Or you could connect it to a story. The dinosaur was enormous. It was so large that it couldn't fit through the classroom door. Now the child has an image, a meaning, a context, and a memory. That's much more powerful. The three-step vocabulary method. Here's a simple method you can use at home. Step 1, see the word. Step 2, understand the word in context. Step 3, use the word yourself. Let's say your child learns the word curious. Don't stop at the definition. Ask, what does curious mean? Then ask, can you use curious in a sentence? Then make it personal. What are you curious about? Suddenly, vocabulary isn't a worksheet anymore. It's a conversation, and that's exactly what you want. Here's a challenge for you. Try this tonight. Pick just one new word from your child's reading. Don't give them 10, just one. Ask them to explain it. Use it in a sentence. Then use it yourself during dinner. You might be surprised how quickly the word becomes part of their everyday language. The vocabulary snowball effect. Here's where things get interesting. Vocabulary can create a kind of snowball effect. The more words a child understands, the easier it becomes to understand what they're reading. The more they read, the more words they encounter. The more words they encounter, the stronger their vocabulary can become. And stronger vocabulary can make writing and speaking easier. It's a cycle. Reading feeds vocabulary. Vocabulary supports comprehension. Comprehension supports learning. Learning builds confidence. And confidence encourages more learning. Now let's talk about writing. Here's another problem. Many parents tell children, write an essay, and then wonder why the child stares at a blank page. Writing isn't one skill. It's several skills working together. The child needs ideas, vocabulary, organization, sentence structure, evidence, and confidence. So instead of saying, write 500 words, Start much smaller. Ask, what happened today that surprised you? That's writing. What would you do if you could spend one day on Mars? That's writing. Do you think students should have homework every day? Why? That's writing. You're teaching the child to form an opinion, explain it, and support it. Those are powerful skills. And here's the mistake I want you to avoid. Don't correct every sentence immediately. If a child writes, "I go to the park," you could immediately say, "Wrong, it's went." Or you could ask, "Tell me what happened at the park." Let them finish the story, then review a few corrections afterward. Why? Because if every sentence gets interrupted, the child can start thinking, writing means making mistakes. Instead, you want them to think, writing means expressing my ideas. Accuracy matters, but confidence matters too. The 10-minute writing challenge. Here's an activity you can start today. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Give your child one interesting question. For example, if you could invent one machine, what would it do? Don't worry about perfect grammar. Don't worry about handwriting. Don't worry about spelling every word perfectly. For 10 minutes, let them write. Then ask them to read it to you. Now ask one question. What part are you most proud of? That's it. You're building writing, communication, reflection, and confidence, all in one activity. Spelling bee, it's more than spelling now. Let's talk about something many parents overlook, the spelling bee. At first glance, it seems simple. A child stands on stage. Someone says a word. The child spells it, correct or incorrect. But look deeper. Spelling practice can involve vocabulary, pronunciation, word origins, memory, attention, and confidence under pressure. Imagine a child preparing for a spelling competition. They encounter a difficult word. They don't know it. Instead of guessing randomly, they learn to ask questions. Can you repeat the word? What language does it come from? Can you use it in a sentence? They're learning strategy, not just spelling. Important parent note, but don't make competitions another source of pressure. Not every child wants to compete, and that's okay. For one child, a spelling bee may be exciting. For another, a science project may be more motivating. Another child might love storytelling. Another might love robotics. The goal isn't to force every child into the same competition. The goal is to discover what makes that particular child want to learn. That's a much more important question. From spelling to public speaking. Now imagine taking that same child, from spelling one word on stage, to explaining an entire idea in front of a classroom. That's where communication skills become powerful. Public speaking doesn't mean giving a 20-minute speech. It can start with something incredibly simple. Ask your child to explain how their favorite game works, why they like a particular book, how they built a Lego model, what they learned in science, or why they think a particular movie was good. Give them 2 minutes. Let them speak. Don't interrupt, then ask, what would you explain differently next time? You're teaching them to organize thoughts, speak clearly, and reflect on their communication. Why communication becomes a superpower. Think about the future. A student may know an incredible idea, but if they can't explain it, who will understand it? A scientist has to explain research. An engineer has to explain a design. A doctor has to explain information clearly. An entrepreneur has to explain a business idea. A software developer has to communicate with a team. A leader has to communicate a vision. So, when your child stands in front of 5 classmates. They're not simply doing a school presentation, they're practicing a skill they'll use for decades. But there's still one piece missing. Reading helps children absorb ideas. Vocabulary helps them understand those ideas. Writing helps them organize ideas. Public speaking helps them communicate ideas. But what happens when 2 children disagree? That's where one of the most overlooked skills enters the picture. Debate. And in Part 4C, we're going there. We'll also talk about responsible AI tools for English learning, the 20-minute daily English routine, and the simple system parents can start this week. But before you leave, there's one question I want you to answer. If your child could improve only one English skill this year, would you choose reading, writing, vocabulary, or speaking? Tell me in the comments, because your answer might help another parent decide where to begin. And remember, don't try to transform everything in one day. One book, one conversation, one paragraph, one new word, one presentation. Small improvements, repeated consistently, can become very big changes over time. I'll see you in upcoming section. So, what happens when 2 students disagree? That's where debate becomes powerful. Now, when I say debate, I'm not talking about turning your 8-year-old into a courtroom lawyer. I'm talking about teaching a child how to say, "I disagree, and here's why." That's a very different skill. Imagine a classroom discussion. The teacher asks, "Should students be allowed to use tablets during school?" One student says, "Yes, because technology helps us learn." Another says, "No, because it can distract students." Now imagine the teacher asks, "Can you give me an example?" Suddenly, the students have to do more than give an opinion. They have to explain it, support it, listen to another viewpoint, and respond respectfully. That's critical thinking. That's communication. And that's why simple debate activities can be so valuable. Here's a challenge you can try tonight. Ask your child, "Should kids have homework every day?" Then tell them, "You have 2 minutes to convince me." Don't tell them what answer to choose. Let them choose. Then ask, "What's your strongest reason?" And finally, "What would someone who disagrees say?" That last question is extremely important, because now your child isn't simply defending an opinion. They're learning to understand another person's perspective. The difference between arguing and debating. There's another lesson hidden here. Debate isn't about winning an argument. Good communication isn't, "I'm right and you're wrong." It's, "Here's what I think. Here's why I think it. I understand your point. And here's where I disagree." That distinction matters, because children will eventually encounter classmates who disagree with them, teachers who challenge them, co-workers who think differently, and adults who don't share their opinions. Teaching respectful disagreement early can become a lifelong advantage. AI is changing English learning now. We need to talk about something that didn't exist in this form when many parents were students. Artificial intelligence. AI can now help students practice vocabulary, generate reading questions, explain difficult concepts, give writing feedback, and even simulate a conversation. But here's the warning. AI should be a learning partner, not a shortcut. If your child asks AI, "Write my entire essay," and then submits it, the child didn't learn the skill. But if the child writes the essay first, then asks AI, "Can you identify 3 places where my argument could be clearer?" That's different. Now AI is acting like a coach. The student is still thinking. And this is where parents need to be careful. Don't ask, Which AI tool should my child use? Ask, what learning problem are we trying to solve? That's the better question. Does your child need vocabulary practice, reading comprehension, writing feedback, speaking practice? Once you know the problem, then choose the tool and always follow the child's school rules and age requirements for any AI service. The 20-minute English system. Now let's bring everything together. Remember the promise I made near the beginning? I told you I'd give you a simple daily habit that takes about 20 minutes. Here it is. You can adjust the timing to your child's age and schedule. Minutes 1 to 10. Read a book, a magazine, a non-fiction article, a chapter, something your child actually enjoys. The goal is consistent reading. Minutes 11 to 15. Vocabulary. Choose 1 or 2 interesting words. Ask, what do you think this word means? How is it used? Can you create your own sentence? Minutes 16 to 20. Express. Your child can write a short paragraph, tell you what they learned, explain the story, or give a 2-minute mini presentation. That's it. 20 minutes, not 3 hours, not another mountain of worksheets. Just a small daily system. The weekly version. But let's take this one step further. What if you don't want to repeat exactly the same activity every day? Here's a simple weekly rotation. Monday, reading plus vocabulary. Tuesday, reading plus writing. Wednesday, reading plus speaking. Thursday, reading plus debate. Friday, let your child choose. Saturday, a longer reading session or creative project. Sunday, talk about what they learned during the week. Notice something? We're not trying to create another school. We're creating an environment where learning becomes normal. What if my child hates reading? This is probably the question some parents are asking right now. What if my child simply doesn't like reading? Don't panic. First, find out why. Maybe the books are too difficult. Maybe they're too easy. Maybe the child prefers non-fiction. Maybe they love comics. Maybe they love sports. Maybe they want mysteries. Maybe they have difficulty with reading itself and need additional support. The answer isn't always, read more. Sometimes the answer is, let's find the right entry point. Imagine a child who refuses traditional novels, but loves Minecraft. Instead of fighting that interest, you might start with books about Minecraft strategy, building, science, or storytelling. Then move outward. Interest can become the bridge to stronger reading habits. And remember, graphic novels count, non-fiction counts, biographies count, magazines can count, age-appropriate digital reading can count. The goal isn't to make reading look impressive. The goal is to make reading happen. What if my child is already advanced? Now let's flip the situation. What if your child already reads far above grade level? Don't simply keep giving them harder books forever. Ask deeper questions. Instead of, what happened? Ask, why do you think the character made that decision? Instead of, did you like the story? Ask, what would you change about the ending? Instead of, what did you learn? Ask, do you agree with the author's argument? That's how you move from reading to analysis. And analysis becomes increasingly important as students move into middle school and high school. The parent's role. Here's something important. You don't have to become your child's English teacher. You don't need a master's degree in education. You don't need to know every grammar rule. Your role can be much simpler. Create opportunities. Ask questions. Listen, encourage, and model the behavior. If your child sees you reading, they learn that reading is normal. If your child sees you asking questions, they learn that curiosity is normal. If your child sees you admit, I don't know, let's find out, They learn that not knowing something isn't failure. It's the beginning of learning. The real goal. And now, let's come back to the question from the beginning. Why can two children in the same classroom end up so differently? Sometimes it's not because one child is naturally smarter. Sometimes it's because one child has developed the confidence to keep learning. Think about the child who once said, "I don't like reading," then finds one book they love. They read another, then another. One day, they raise their hand in class. They answer a question. They write a paragraph, then an essay, then give a presentation. The transformation isn't always visible in one day, but slowly, something changes. The child stops saying, "I can't," and starts saying, "Let me try." That's the real goal. Not perfect grades, not winning every competition, not having the biggest vocabulary in the classroom. It's developing a child who believes, "I can learn," the complete English roadmap. So let's close every loop. If your child is in elementary school, start with reading. Build vocabulary through context. Practice writing without creating fear. Explore spelling competitions if your child enjoys them. Give them opportunities to speak. Introduce simple debates. Use technology and AI responsibly. And create a small, daily learning routine. You don't need to do everything. Start with one habit, then build. Because education isn't a race against another child. It's a journey against yesterday's version of yourself. Before we finish, here's your simple checklist. Can your child read regularly, explain what they read, learn new words from context, write a short paragraph, express an opinion, give a reason for that opinion, speak confidently for 2 minutes, listen to another viewpoint, ask thoughtful questions, use technology responsibly? If several answers are "not yet," that's okay. Not yet is not failure. It's a starting point. And that brings us to the end of Part 4. In Part 1, we explored the biggest questions parents ask about elementary school success. In Part 2, we uncovered opportunities many families don't know about. In Part 3, we explored advanced math and the Math Olympiad pathway. And now, we've built the English roadmap: reading, vocabulary, writing, spelling, public speaking, debate, and responsible AI learning. But we're not finished, because there's another world of opportunities that can completely change how a child learns. Science, STEM, robotics, coding, engineering, and yes, artificial intelligence. That's what we're exploring in next part. So if you want to continue this course, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And comment Part 5 if you're continuing the journey. And share this video with one parent who might find it useful. Remember, you don't have to give your child every opportunity. You just need to help them discover the opportunities that fit them. Because the goal isn't to raise a child who knows everything, it's to raise a child who never stops asking, why, how, and what can I learn next? I'll see you in next video.